All right, we'd like to welcome you all to Closing the Deal, the final in our series on hiring and HR processes. We again want to welcome back Beth Jones from Concordia Plans, the Director of Ministry Solutions. We want to thank Beth for doing this three-part series. It's been phenomenal, the response we've been getting back from our principals and directors across the district. Let's start with a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for leaders across the district and for the workers you are providing and will be providing. Lord, we ask you continue to bless the workers and ministries of Minnesota South District. Lord, bless the words spoken today and those who are here to listen both today and in the future from the recordings. May these words and may the understanding gained from that bless our ministries and bless the spoken word and the preached word and the learned word. We ask this all in the name of your Son, Jesus. Amen. All right, close the deal, Beth.
Okay, let's get started. All right, so let's see, 1 second. I froze up just 1 second. Okay, there we go. Sorry, sometimes technology is great and sometimes it doesn't work, but we just kind of flex and flow. Okay, so this entire series, we've been talking about where to find candidates and how to screen your candidates. And then this last session is going to be about closing the deal so you don't lose any in the final process. Sometimes churches are losing people because they're not acting real quick. And so this point of this session today is to help you to not lose out on some of those candidates. And if you haven't been at some of our other sessions, to give you a quick summary, it's flipped. The candidate market is flipped. Years ago, there'd be multiple candidates for a job, and they were trying to convince you to hire them. And right now, there are more jobs than humans that are available to fill those jobs. And so now employers are competing for talent. And so that is why we're doing those series. If this is the first of the series that you're joining us for, we had two other ones. The first one was specifically on where you can find workers, how to do a job posting, where to put it, and some different ideas. And the second one was about how to screen those candidates, pre-screening best practice, and how to do a behavioral-based interview so you can hopefully avoid some pain by hiring maybe the wrong individual. Both of those have handouts from the district. The first one's got a white paper with ideas of where to hire, and the second one has actually got some interview packets, candidate assessment form. There's a question and answer on illegal-based questions, and there's also a 75 question bank of questions that I've used with probably hundreds of administrators as I've done this series. So you can kind of pick and choose and use some of those. So if you haven't received those materials and you would like that, please reach out to your district. I'm sure they'd be happy to get it for you. And then this session today is closing the deal, which is specifically about after you've decided who you want to move forward with. Today, I'm going to cover how do you keep candidates interested, making an offer, and things that you might want to include when you're talking or doing an offer letter or contract, things to include in it. And then I'm going to branch off just a little bit about what do you do when you set up your new hire, because I'm seeing a lot of ministries that are forgetting some key components, and sometimes it's just good to have a list. So I'm going to go ahead and cover some of that today. The first thing that I like to tell people is that it's really important to act quickly. Sometimes employers can ghost candidates. And so we've gotten to this almost norm where if people don't hear from you, they might just think that they're not being pursued. So make sure you're periodically reaching out to a candidate if they're still in the pipeline. If they are actively looking for a job, they will continue to post for positions or continue to explore options. And you want to make sure that they know that you're still actively considering them. And once you do decide, hey, we want to hire this person, you want to reach out. Generally, candidates want to understand what the process is. You usually want to do an offer quickly. And a week or two within the time of you hosting your interviews is ideal. If you can't reasonably do that within a week or two, even if you let them know, hey, we appreciated interviewing with you, we're setting up second interviews and here's the timeline, that can go a long way. Or, hey, we have a board meeting coming up at the end of the month where we're going to be discussing the interviews. You're still being considered in the process. That can also be helpful, so they just know that they're still being considered. So make sure you're sharing that information with them, and you're talking about any delays or the timeline of any decisions. The other thing you want to do is make sure that they're still interested. So you're making sure you're answering any questions they had in the interview process, because you don't want to go through all the hoops to hire someone and then find out, oh, nope, I found something already. So just make sure as you're doing those checkouts, you're still assessing that. You also don't want to ever decline your candidates you're not selecting unless you know 100% you're not going to consider them. So sometimes employers will go ahead and tell the second and the third, and the fourth, oh, we didn't select you, if you're even lucky to have that many. And then they proceed with the first candidate, and that candidate, when it comes down time to offer, they didn't accept. And then you lose your second and third candidate because they went and found employment elsewhere. So if you know someone is a no way, I would go ahead and send that decline email. If you think someone is like a good second choice or a third choice, don't decline them unless you know for sure that first candidate you offer to, you have at least a verbal offer. Then as you're preparing for the offer, there's 3 different like tidbits or components you want to make sure that you have before you contact the candidate. The first thing I should tell you is to review your benefits, and that can vary a lot from ministry to ministry. I will give you some resources. If you use Concordia Plans benefits, I'll point you to the right direction of where you can find resources. But even if you don't use us, I'm still going to have like some lists later in the presentation for you to kind of go and look and see, do we have some of these things? A mistake a lot of employers make is they just purely talk about salary and they don't necessarily talk about that whole package, and they're not getting credit. They're spending the money on that package. It gives it more of a complete view for how the employee is compensated and valued, but they're not always speaking to the benefits. So I'll give you a list and give you some more information about what you would want to include in some of that in just a little bit. The other thing you want to do is make sure you understand what the salary is. Sometimes I hear like, oh, I got this position offered, but they're still waiting on the salary. It's really hard to know for sure if someone's going to take it if they don't have the salary. So make sure you know how to determine a salary. And again, I'll give you some resources, whether or not you're with plans that are available to you at no cost. And then know your approval process and timeline. You don't want to lose valuable time with a candidate once you decide that you want to hire someone, to figure out who has the authority to do the offer. Do you have to have a board meeting? When is the board meeting? Could you call, or is it just a committee has the decision? Just make sure you kind of talk through that before you go through the process so you don't lose candidates at the end if you can kind of help it. Now, one of those resources that I wanted to mention is the compensation decision support tool. This is a resource that is no charge to your ministry, and you do not have to be participating in Concordia plans to be able to utilize this resource. This is something my team actually does. The compensation decision support tool provides specific information, market reference points for your ministry based on your zip code, the size of your employer, the candidate information like their education and years of experience, and the position that they have. And then it gives you a printout. And in that printout, you can see market reference points. It shows you the math of how we came up with those market reference points. And then it also has some information of benefits. So that's just another resource. If you are not familiar with the compensation decision support tool, you can find more information on Concordia Plan's website. It's not in scope to go into this in depth today, but there is videos on how to use the compensation decision support tool. There's FAQs, and there are the links to go ahead and get out there. I also have my division's email address, ministrysolutions@Concordia Plans. So if you need help finding that on the website, if you want to talk through something, my team is happy to support you further. So that's what that contact information is on there as well. And again, there's no charge for our ministries to use this, and you don't need to use that. It's available to all LCMS ministries, not just those that are currently in the Concordia plans. All right, so the next thing is, so once you've decided the pay and you've decided the benefits, the next thing you need to do is you should do an offer to the candidate. And it is normal to do the offer verbal first. So you want to pick up the phone and call and talk through the candidate. It gives you a chance to answer any last minute questions that they have. But you also don't want to go through the paperwork of the process of putting everything together and then send it to them and find out they already took another offer and they're out. They pulled themselves out. You want to make sure that they're, still interested in that position before you go ahead and put either a offer letter or a contract together. So do that first verbal offer. You want to make sure you include compensation information so they see the full picture. And when I say total comp, it's not just cash. It's not just cash directly to the employee. It's indirect cash, stuff that you're paying on behalf of that employee. So what you're paying towards their health insurance. Maybe you have a retirement account you're contributing to. It's programs that your ministry might have. And I'll give you a full list so you don't have to come up with a list in just a little bit, but make sure you're doing that whole picture. It is normal for the candidate to ask if they can have a couple days to think about an offer. So don't be off put if they ask, can I think about this over the weekend? Can I get back to you after a few days if I want to talk to my spouse, especially if they have to move, they want to figure out some estimates. So that does not mean they're not interested. I do recommend that you have an end date that they're going to get back to you by the end of the week, or they're going to get back to you by Monday, just so you're not being held kind of in a holding tank and they don't get back to you. So just make sure you have an end date of when they're going to get back to you. And the other thing that's usual is for candidates to ask in-depth information on the benefits. You should brush up and have a high-level overview of the benefits, but don't feel offended if they ask you about the benefits or if they ask you about the salary or if they try to negotiate. I'm seeing a lot of hiring managers don't realize that higher education right now is actually instructing people to negotiate. They're telling people about pay transparency and how to figure out what your worth is. So you could be hiring for a few different positions, maybe administrative assistant, or you're hiring for a teacher, an administrator. So it's just really good to know that culturally pay transparency and asking those questions is very, very normal. And it's not something that means that they're not interested in the mission. So just wanted to let you know that, and so that there's no more stigma with that. All right, so now I'm going to go through the list of what the whole packages. When I say here are things that you need to be able to speak to with ministries, I tried to focus on different components that would be only for nonprofit. There are other things that could be part of a whole total compensation, like profit sharing or stock options. But since that doesn't really apply, I'm only going to kind of cover ones that potentially could be for ministries. So when you're looking at the salary, you want to talk about base pay. Occasionally, sometimes RSOs might have some kind of variable pay. Sometimes our ministries could, if there's maybe a premium for certain shifts or certain hour, if you have a daycare, that's a possibility. If there's a bonus or Christmas bonus or something that the ministry gives on a regular basis, you maybe could talk about that. The other thing I would call it is if you do happen to do a SECA offset, that SECA is the portion of taxes the self-employed commission minister would have to pay if you're doing an offset. Make sure you tell them that. Sometimes they don't realize you're doing it. You want to make sure you're getting credit for being able to do that. You also want to go over their benefit package. Health, dental, vision are the three big ones. I like to talk about Vitality. If you have the health insurance plan through Concordia Plans, Vitality is a program that awards gift cards to ministries, or I'm sorry, to employees that are participating in it for making healthier actions or choices. They can set it up to a Fitbit and earn gift cards. That doesn't cost you extra money if you're in our health plan to participate in Vitality. There's also other ancillary programs like clinical programs if someone has some health concerns. There's telehealth, mental health, etc. And then I like to give them a high-level overview or point them to where you would find additional information. Make sure you're talking about your retirement and savings plans. If you are with Concordia Plans, we call that the CRP, Concordia Retirement Plan. Or you might have a different pension if you're not with us for the benefits. The vast majority of our ministries do have the CRP. Some of you might have we call it the CRISP, the CRSP, which is a 403B account. If you're doing that, you may or may not have an employer match. I generally do share information when I'm talking to a candidate, let them know what the current match is from an employer perspective. I also will share with them on the benefits, for example, the health, what the employer is paying for the premium, if they're paying 100% or 80% of the premium cost. All of that is information that that candidate should know. Some of these next type you may have access to, either the employer is paying for it, like life and death benefits, or some of it like accident or critical illness. It might be something you are giving employees access to, but you're not paying for it. So I just wanted to give you guys a full list of the variety of other types of income replacement insurance that there is. Don't forget about vacation time off benefits, and make sure when you're talking to them, you're sharing with them what that looks like. You might have just a whole PTO policy where everything's in one bucket, or you might carve that out like X number of days are vacation, or you have so many sick days. Maybe you have personal leave, parental leave. If you give your employees sabbatical time, that's something you might want to call out. Sometimes ministries will have something for that in a policy or handbook, but they're not doing that when they're calling or hiring a worker. And it's just really good to give them that whole picture. Talk about your holidays and what happens, maybe the number of holidays you get or which are the holidays. And then if you're hiring a position that has the ability to be flex time or hybrid availability, make sure you're calling that out. Usually doesn't cost anything if you're doing that, and it's a real win for a lot of employees. You might have some support programs at your ministry. So this could be discount programs. If you're at a large ministry, sometimes employers will get access to a platform that gives their employees discounts at a lot of different vendors that are national. But sometimes you might just have a program where if they show their ID at a couple restaurants in your neighborhood, that there's a discount program. And so if you can kind of put something like that together, that's usually no cost, and that's kind of a win. If your board or the parents give the teacher a classroom budget, make sure you're mentioning that, even if it's a couple $100 that they're getting every year for classroom supplies or decoration supplies. Some ministries do tuition relief. So there's a reduction in tuition for their employees, or maybe it's free tuition for employees. Make sure you mention that, because that can be part of their overall decision and accepting a position and their total compensation. And then some ministries and or districts have a debt reduction program for hiring church workers. So if you have a program like that at your ministry, make sure you're getting credit for it, not forgetting to mention what that program is and how you would utilize it. Another big one that a lot of our ministries do, but they forget to include in recruiting or in the offer process, is talk about the growth and development for their candidates. And this is something that resonates a lot with new candidates coming in. They want to make sure that there is an opportunity for growth and development. So some examples of this could be tuition reimbursement. If they want to have continuing ed, maybe there's a certain amount that your ministry is willing to pay. If they have a professional certification or membership, if you guys regularly attend the conferences, and if the ministry is paying for them to attend that conference, make sure you mention it. A lot of ministries are like, yeah, of course we do that, but they forget to tell their new hires that that is something that's consistent in their culture. And then if you're having especially brand new teachers specifically, is a mentorship or a training program. And that could get, very sophisticated if you're hiring on a regular basis. But it could just be that you're giving them a point person and someone that's willing to meet with them on a regular basis, other than the administrator, so they feel supported and have someone to go to. And so that is tested very high in focus groups and studies that is really important for brand new teachers. And then the other thing that you can include are some cultural things when you're talking to them about what it's like to work there. That could be fun Fridays. Maybe you have relaxed dress code on Fridays. That doesn't cost your ministry anything. You might have regular appreciation activities or programs. So maybe once a month, a parent is appreciating the entire staff, or you have an appreciation month. You can kind of talk about those as regular and consistent cultural activities. If there's regular meals coming on or coworker events, you want to give them a sense for what it's going to be like to work there. And if there's any specific parent or board support that they are planning on doing for a new hire. And one of the things that I've done is ask, well, what are we willing to do? And sometimes they'll surprise you with what they're willing to come up with, and to be able to encourage someone to start and to feel supported. Be specific when you're sharing the information, not just like we have a PTO, we have a vacation, we have a health insurance plan, but try to, when you're talking about it, know those details if the candidate asks or know where to go. And if you are utilizing Concordia Plans benefits, we do have a benefit brochure that you're able to utilize from the website. And so I just wanted to call that out. This is just a few screenshots from it. It's not the whole inclusive thing. Even if you don't use our benefits, it just gives you a list of possible benefits that you could look and see if you have something similar if you're not with us, or if you are with us, it gives you a high level overview of what some of the options are. And then you can provide some additional information to the candidate if they have questions, for example, on what the contribution is for the 403B or how much you're paying of the income into their CRP, for example. And if you'd like more information on welcoming a worker toolkit, I have that. The path on there is under employers. You're going to go to resources, and then it's called welcoming a worker toolkit. You can also put it in the search engine. And if you have any questions on the benefits as you're calling a worker, if they ask something real weedy or real specific, or you just need to brush up, you can call your account manager and they'd be happy to help you. Or we have a call center and we have an email address that our customer contact is more than happy to help provide some information or point you in the right direction. Okay, so after you verbally talk to the candidate, here's just a few things that are different between an offer letter or a contract. In education, it's possible you're using both depending on the type of worker that you are hiring or calling. Offer letters, just a few quick tidbits on this. They don't usually want to include any phrases that promise future earnings or raises. If people ask you what the process is to get a raise, you get a raise every year, just make sure you're not committing you as an employer into anything. You can say typically in the past, you know, they look at our rate, they look at our wages, and then they make a determination, but just make sure you don't include anything that says that there for sure would be additional income unless that's something the ministry wants to do. You want to be careful with offer letters so you're not deteriorating your at-will status, which means that the employee and or employer can end their employment. And if you do list duties on an offer letter, which is not as common as you might see in a contract, you want to make sure it states it's not a full list, just so that if you needed to add something or change something, you're able to do that. On the contract side, that usually is going to be a little bit more specific with salary and length of employment. It does lock you in as the employer and the employee for the duration of the contract. And then that usually does lay out some specific responsibilities for both the employer and the employee, and both parties would generally sign that. So components that you would put in both of these types of agreements that are role specific would be the position or title that you're offering the person. What's the start date? Their salary or hourly wage, their schedule. So if they're, especially if they're part-time or full-time, or they've got a flex schedule, you should discuss their employment status, whether they're part-time or full-time, and their exemption status. Exempt means exempt from overtime. Non-exempt means they're hourly. And the Fair Labor Standards Act does have some requirements on how you can make someone exempt. They have to meet some criteria. So if you're not sure what those two mean, you can give me a call after this and I can point you to some different resources to help you. You should have something in the offer letter that talks about their benefit eligibility, which benefits they'd be eligible for. I usually don't list in a cover letter, or I'm sorry, an offer letter, all of the benefits, but I might give them a packet, like a printout to supplement with it. I usually include a disclaimer that benefits are evaluated regularly and can change from year to year. So just that's just kind of in case you do analyze it, you just don't want them to think that it'll always be a constant. Some organizational specific things you'll put in that offer letter, or you'll include with a contract, is onboarding details, like the logistics of where their first day is and what time, who they should ask for the first day. If there's anything they need to bring their first day, you'd want to make sure you're including that. An example of that could be direct deposit information, like their bank account routing number, if you want to set them up for payroll, and then their documentation to prove they're eligible to work in the United States to complete that I-9. Generally, an offer letter or a contract will have some contingencies, meaning they're being offered this position, but it's contingent on the successful completion of a background check or a reference check. Some ministries might require a drug test. You would usually know that. And so what that means is if they were to fail that background check or the reference check, then you could do what's called an offer. You could rescind the offer. And then usually another contingency is that they're able to prove that they're eligible to work in the United States. Generally with that contingency, going up to the organizational specific for the things to bring, I usually give them a copy of the I-9. You can't tell them which documents to bring in an I-9, but you can give them a copy of the I-9 so they can see the different categories. And so they can determine if they want to bring something from A or if they have a combination of the B and the C. Once you have your new hire, here's my hot list of new hire onboarding things to cover. Not all of these might be in your first meeting with your ministry, but I just wanted to make sure that you're remembering to go through that, especially if you're not hiring. The first is an I-9, and I've said the word I-9 a few times. A lot of our ministries don't realize they should be doing an I-9 for every new hire. This is a form that's required of you as an employer. It proves the employee is eligible to work in the United States. They have to bring identification that's very specific from categories. They can either bring one piece of documentation from list A, or they can bring one thing from B and one thing from C. But it is just something I'm seeing a lot of ministries are forgetting that they have that requirement to do the I-9. So just make sure you are doing the I-9. The section 1 of the I-9 the employee fills out is supposed to be completed on their first day of employment. Section 2 that the employer fills out when they're verifying the identification documents needs to be conducted within 3 days of the new hire starting. Other things I'd go over right away are some payroll documents. So there's tax forms like the W-4 and to complete their direct deposit if they're participating in direct deposit, if you have that as an employer. Usually you want to go over the benefits with them or schedule time with a benefit expert. If it's not you as the administrator, maybe you have someone on your team who does the benefits, or they can set up a time to meet with someone that is knowledgeable about those and get that enrollment process going. I go over safety protocols. That would be like school shooting, sexual misconduct awareness, or other student trainings. Student privacy trainings would be some examples of those really hot protocols or tickets you'd want them to know like right away their first day. Usually you do like an equipment checkout or provide them with like their badge or their key or their laptop. And then usually you'll put a note in the employment file of what you've provided them. So if they ever leave, you know what to collect. Usually there's a handbook review if you have a handbook. If you don't have a handbook at all, or if you haven't had one that's been updated recently, we have a resource through Concordia Plans that can assist you with that. So you can let me know afterwards if you have any questions. Another big call is to do harassment training right away when they're hired. So this is usually sometimes called sexual harassment training, and you usually have to have a sign off that they've completed this. And then you want to make sure that anything that you're not addressing in that first meeting, that you have a training or acclimation plan. So you might carve that out. Maybe you've got one teacher on your team that's willing to do one component, and then another teacher is willing to do another component. So you've kind of listed some go-to persons so that that person is feeling well supported as they are being acclimated with your mission, and then they can focus on the mission rather than some of the stuff that might be worrying the candidate. I have my contact information for both my department here at Concordia Plans. Ministry Solutions offers a whole bunch of variety of resources for our ministries. We currently have payroll services, HR services, the compensation decision support tool, and our newest service, which is called My Administrative Partner, which actually provides payroll services and bookkeeping services for ministries. And I also have my contact information on the slide. You are welcome to reach out to me directly if you have a follow-up from this presentation. And I'm going to open it up for questions in case anybody does have any specific questions. This is recorded, so if you have something that you do not want to be shared across ministries, you are welcome to email me to that directly. And at this time, I'll go ahead, I'll open it up to questions if there are any.
Beth, this is Brenda Lovehog. Can you tell us how often or when the compensation tool gets updated and revised?
Yeah, we analyze it every single year. A best practice to look at market reference points is actually every couple years. Most employers don't do it every year, but we are doing it every year because with inflation, we've seen some wonky things happening with increases, and we want to make sure that we're giving you the best because of the worker shortage. And so we look at the information. The information is pulled in the fall, and then it is refreshed in January. And so the information in the comp tool right now is brand new if you wanted to go out and look at it.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. And also I will just say, we can consult if you have any questions that the website can't address on the compensation support tool. Some people get really into the details, or they might want to talk through a few scenarios, like maybe you have a pay compression issue where you maybe haven't kept up with market, but you need to bring some new people on. I'm happy to talk with you, anyone offline, if that's the case. Or if they just wanted to know an assessment of like where they are from a cash component versus benefit perspective, we can kind of talk about total comp because it kind of usually looks like a teeter-totter. When you're like kind of weighing out the two. So if you ever have any questions or want to consult, I'm happy to meet with you or anyone from your ministry, or have someone from my staff do it as well. Any other questions? No? Okay. Good. Well, if anything does come up as you're looking at this, or if you're looking at any of the other resources that have come up from the previous presentations, you can feel free to give me a call. I'm happy to help and support you. Just let me know we're in the Minnesota South webinar series, and if there is any ideas for future content, if you think there's something ministries specifically would be very helpful for them to know, or something that you think other administrators would like to know, shoot me that idea. I'd be happy to help our ministries in the field. Great, thank you for coming.